The grand palace of the alien kingdom stood tall and imposing, its spires stretching toward the sky, glittering under the light of distant stars. Inside, the atmosphere was filled with tension. Princess Xyra, the future ruler of the empire, paced restlessly in her private chambers. Her people were on the brink of war with neighboring alien factions. If they did not find a way to bring peace, countless lives would be lost. Yet today there was a new hope, something she hadn't expected. She had heard rumors, whispers in the royal court, of a human diplomat sent by Earth. At first, she thought it was a joke. Humans, a primitive species compared to the advanced alien races, were rarely taken seriously. But today, the reality of this human diplomat was inescapable. As she stood before the window, gazing out at the landscape of her homeworld, she couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. Down below, she saw the diplomat's transport ship descending from the sky. The large vessel glowed as it slowly landed near the grand entrance of the palace. It was a simple ship, nothing like the grandeur of her kingdom's space fleets. It seemed almost out of place. Xyra couldn't help but feel a mix of curiosity and irritation. Why had the human been sent here? What did he think he could achieve in such a complex, intergalactic situation? The human race was far from powerful in the grand scheme of things. Still, the fact that Earth had sent a diplomat meant that they believed something could be done. Her royal advisors stood behind her, nervous, whispering about the impending meeting. "Your Highness," one of them said, "perhaps you should prepare yourself. We don't know what to expect from him." Xyra turned, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I've dealt with alien diplomats, warriors, and even criminals. I will handle a human diplomat just the same." But despite her words, her heart raced with anticipation. Today would be unlike any other. She could already feel the weight of destiny hanging in the air. This human diplomat, for better or worse, would shape the future of her kingdom, and perhaps the future of the galaxy itself. As the doors of the palace opened to welcome him, Princess Xyra knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The air inside the grand chamber grew thick with anticipation as Princess Xyra sat upon her high throne. She gazed down at the human diplomat who had just entered, his simple clothes contrasting sharply with the elaborate alien robes of the nobles around him. His name was Ambassador Michael Gray, and although he was surrounded by royal guards and advisors, he stood tall and composed, a calmness in his eyes that made the princess uneasy. The room fell silent, the tension palpable as the human diplomat approached the central podium. His gaze was unwavering, meeting hers directly, as if he didn't care about the weight of her position or the rumors surrounding her kingdom. Xyra's eyes narrowed. She had dealt with countless diplomats, but none had ever dared to act so boldly, especially in her presence. "Your Highness," Michael spoke, his voice steady and surprisingly clear. "I come as a representative of Earth, but more importantly, I come as someone who believes in peace. I believe we can prevent this war before it consumes both your kingdom and my people." Xyra's eyes widened slightly. The last thing she expected from this human was such confidence. For a moment, she wondered if he truly understood the gravity of the situation. The war between the alien races had been building for years, and now, with tensions at their highest, it seemed almost impossible to avoid conflict. "You speak of peace," Xyra said, her voice calm yet laced with disbelief. "But you cannot possibly understand the complexity of the galaxy. The forces aligned against us are far too powerful, and even your people, as advanced as they may be, stand no match for them." The human diplomat remained calm, as if he had anticipated her doubts. He stepped forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "I don't claim to understand everything," he said, "but I know one thing for sure. Peace can never be achieved by fearing the enemy. It must come from understanding, from cooperation. Humans are survivors. We may not have the power of your advanced technology, but we have something stronger: the will to do what's right, even in the face of overwhelming odds." Xyra was taken aback. His words were simple, Yet they cut through the walls she had built around herself. Was it possible? Could this human truly offer something her empire had not even considered? As she stared into his eyes, something stirred within her. This was not the brash, arrogant human she had expected. There was a quiet strength to him, something she couldn't quite place. A part of her wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all. Yet another diplomat offering hollow promises, but another part of her, a deeper, more hidden part, felt a spark of hope. "What do you propose?" HFY finally asked, her voice softening. Michael Gray smiled, his confidence unwavering. "A plan, Your Highness. A plan that, if you dare to trust me, could change everything." Princess Syra listened closely, her sharp eyes never leaving the human diplomat as he began to lay out his plan. The room was silent except for Michael Gray's calm voice, cutting through the tension like a blade. No one dared interrupt, not even the royal advisors who usually filled every moment of silence with their own doubts and fears. "Your Highness," Michael began, "I won't pretend to know all the answers, but the first step in ending this war is understanding that we can't fight it alone. We need allies, and those allies aren't just other alien species. They're the ones we least expect." Syra's brow furrowed in confusion. "Allies?" she repeated, her voice skeptical. "The galaxy is already divided. No one trusts each other. Everyone wants power, not peace." Michael nodded, acknowledging her doubts. "I know, but you don't win peace by fighting only those who oppose you. You win peace by showing your enemies the power of unity and the strength in numbers. Humans have been through wars, terrible wars that nearly destroyed our planet, and we learned something through it all. Sometimes, it's not about overpowering the enemy. It's about outsmarting them, bringing together the ones they never thought could work together." Syra narrowed her eyes. This human had something in his words that made her pause, something she had not expected. But was he speaking the truth? Could there truly be a way to end this war without the destruction she had long prepared for? "What do you suggest?" she asked, leaning forward slightly, her curiosity piqued. Michael took a deep breath, knowing that this next part of his plan would be the hardest to sell. "I want you to consider an alliance with the most unlikely of allies, the very species who have been your enemies for generations. A coalition, one based not on dominance but on mutual benefit. It won't be easy, but it is the only way forward." Syra shook her head, her thoughts racing. "You want me to unite with those who have fought against us for so long." Her voice was sharp, her distrust clear. "You are asking for the impossible. These factions are as different as night and day. They'll never agree." Michael's eyes softened, yet his voice remained firm. "I know it sounds impossible, but I'm asking you to trust me. Together, we can broker a peace no one thought possible. I will do whatever it takes to make sure this happens, even if I have to risk everything." The princess could feel a shift in the air, as if the weight of his words was settling around them. There was something in his resolve that made her question her own beliefs. For the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. "You are asking for a lot, human," she said, her voice quieter now. "But perhaps it is time to consider something new." Michael Gray smiled, a flicker of victory in his eyes. "It will be difficult, Your Highness, but together we can rewrite the future." Syra stood, her mind racing with the possibilities. Could she truly trust this human diplomat? Was his plan a path to peace, or would it lead to her kingdom's destruction? The tension was far from over, but one thing was certain. Everything was about to change. The chamber fell into an uneasy silence as Princess Syra stood motionless, deep in thought. The human diplomat's proposal had planted a seed of uncertainty in her mind. For years, she had ruled her kingdom with unwavering strength and resolute authority. She had seen her people struggle and had made decisions based on the certainty that survival required strength and isolation. But now, this human, this ambassador Michael Gray, had suggested the unthinkable, to trust their most dangerous enemies and form an alliance. Unite with them. Hyra repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. She paced the room, her mind racing with the implications. How can I trust anyone who has tried to tear us apart for so long? Michael Gray's calm demeanor remained unchanged as he watched the princess wrestle with her doubts. He knew this was the hardest part of his plan, convincing her that an alliance was the only option left. He spoke again, this time with more urgency in his voice. I understand your fear, he said, but this war, Your Highness, it's not just about defeating enemies. It's about changing the very foundation of how we interact with each other. The alliances you fought for in the past have only brought destruction. If you continue down that path, your kingdom will burn. You don't need to trust them all at once, but you can start with one. Zara halted in her tracks, turning to face him. One, she asked, intrigued despite herself. Who could we possibly start with? Michael's expression hardened, and he stepped closer, lowering his voice as though revealing a secret. The Ankara, their leader, Commander Volgar, is ruthless, but he's pragmatic. The Ankara might not want peace, but they do respect strength. If you show him the power of a united front, he'll listen. Zara felt a chill run down her spine. The Ankara were feared across the galaxy. Their warriors were known for their savage fighting techniques, and their leader, Commander Volgar, was a brutal and merciless figure. If there was anyone who would never bend to diplomacy, it was him. Yet there was something in Michael's eyes, something in his tone, that made her hesitate. What makes you think the Ankara would ever agree to this? She asked, her voice skeptical. You speak of strength, but Volgar only respects bloodshed. Michael's eyes met hers, unflinching. Sometimes bloodshed is inevitable, but what if you could show him that strength can be wielded in other ways? What if you could show him that there's power in the willingness to change, to fight for something greater than dominance? What if the human race could help your people see a different way forward? Zara stared at him, her thoughts clashing within her. She had always fought with the belief that power alone would secure peace. But Michael was offering her something she had never considered, a chance to rewrite the rules of engagement, a chance to defeat her enemies, not with force, but with something far more unpredictable, diplomacy. The room seemed to close in around her as the weight of the decision pressed down on her shoulders. Her kingdom, her people, her future, everything depended on the choice she made now. What you're asking of me is risky, she said, her voice heavy with the burden of leadership. But I see that you're willing to risk everything too. Michael nodded solemnly. We all must, Your Highness, if we want a chance at peace. I won't lie to you. This will be dangerous. Volgar won't go down without a fight. But it's the only way forward. Zara took a deep breath, her heart pounding. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of the crown lift ever so slightly. This wasn't just a battle for her kingdom's survival. It was a chance to change the course of history. Then we begin with the Ankara, Tyra said, her voice resolute. But know this, human, if this fails, I will hold you accountable. Michael's face broke into a faint smile, but it was the kind of smile that spoke of determination, not joy. I wouldn't have it any other way, Your Highness. The princess gave him one last, searching look, and then turned to face the future. The journey ahead was uncertain, but she knew one thing. Everything had changed. The stars outside the windows of the royal ship stretched into thin lines as the ship hurtled through space, heading toward the Ankara's dark, war-torn homeworld. Princess Zara stood at the window, her sharp gaze fixed on the distant lights of the galaxy. The weight of the decision she had made was like a stone in her chest. She had chosen to trust the human diplomat, Michael Gray, and now she was heading into the heart of enemy territory. Beside her, Michael remained silent, his presence a constant reminder of the fragile alliance they were attempting to forge. It felt as though the very air around them crackled with tension. The Ankara were ruthless, their people bred for war, and their leader, Commander Volgar, was said to be a monster who never showed mercy. This was a gamble, a dangerous one. I can't believe I'm doing this, Tyra murmured, half to herself. The Ankara are a scourge on the galaxy. Their brutal ways have brought nothing but suffering. How could anyone trust them? Michael turned toward her, his face grim but resolute. Because sometimes, Princess, we need to make unlikely alliances to survive. If we don't, we risk losing everything. Zara turned her gaze away from him, her eyes narrowed with uncertainty. She had been trained to lead with strength, to make decisions that were clear-cut and strategic. But this felt different. It wasn't just a matter of military power or tactical advantage. It was about something she had long forgotten. Hope. We'll need more than hope to make this work, she said, her voice sharp as ever. The Ankara won't care about our plans. They care about dominance, bloodshed. They don't know how to make peace. Michael gave her a knowing look. I know, Your Highness, but sometimes it's not about making them understand peace. It's about showing them that survival depends on it. If you can prove that you have something they need, something they can't get through violence, they might listen. Zyra sighed, feeling the crushing weight of the gamble she was about to take. And what if they don't? What if they try to destroy us instead? Michael's eyes softened. Then we fight. But we fight together. His words lingered in the silence, a subtle promise of what could be. Zyra couldn't help but wonder what kind of man Michael Gray really was, what made him so determined to bring peace to a galaxy so accustomed to war. She had never encountered anyone quite like him before. The ship's alarms suddenly blared, dragging Zyra from her thoughts. Her eyes shot to the control panel. The Ankara's homeworld was ahead. We're entering their space, she said, her tone now laced with authority. Prepare for landing. Michael nodded, his expression unwavering. I'm ready. Zyra's heart beat faster as the ship began its descent into the atmosphere of the Ankara's homeworld. The planet below was a war-torn wasteland, its once proud cities reduced to rubble. The very land itself seemed scarred by years of conflict. Her pulse quickened with the realization that she was about to step foot on enemy soil, into the heart of a species who had never known peace. As the ship touched down on the harsh, rocky surface of the Ankara world, the princess could feel the weight of history pressing down on her. This wasn't just a diplomatic mission. It was a chance to change everything, to turn enemies into allies. The hatch of the ship opened with a hiss, revealing the harsh terrain of the planet. And standing before them was an imposing figure, Commander Volgar himself, flanked by his warriors, their weapons gleaming in the dim light of the dying sun. Zyra's eyes met Volgar's cold, merciless gaze, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. This was it, the moment that would either make or break everything. Michael stepped forward, breaking the silence, his voice calm but firm. Commander Volgar, it's time for a new kind of diplomacy. Zyra held her breath, watching the exchange unfold. There was no turning back now. They were in the Ankara's territory, and if this didn't work, they would face the wrath of one of the most powerful and dangerous factions in the galaxy. But something in her gut told her that this was the only chance they had left. Your Highness, Michael said, his voice softer now, the future of the galaxy is in your hands. Zyra stood tall, her resolve firm. Then let's make sure it's a future worth fighting for. With those words, she stepped forward, walking toward Commander Volgar. The Ankara leader stood imposingly before them, his towering frame and steely expression sending a chill down Zyra's spine. Commander Volgar was everything the rumors had claimed, cold, calculating, and relentless. His eyes, like two pits of darkness, studied the princess and her human diplomat with disdain, as if they were nothing more than insects to be crushed beneath his boot. The tension in the air thickened, as though the very atmosphere of the planet had been charged with the weight of countless battles fought over the years. Zyra's heart beat in her throat as she tried to maintain her composure. This wasn't just about diplomacy anymore. It was about survival. And the moment she had dreaded had finally arrived. Standing face to face with the Ankara's greatest terror. You've come to beg for mercy. Volgar's voice boomed, deep and menacing. His eyes flicked to Michael, narrowing in disdain. A human and an alien princess. What sort of farce is this? You expect me to ally with those I've crushed in battle? Zara felt her blood run cold. This wasn't the negotiation she had hoped for. It was a challenge. Volgar wasn't interested in peace. He wanted a test of strength, and he would use whatever he could to break her resolve. Michael stepped forward, unfazed by the commander's intimidating presence. "We're not here to beg, Commander," he said, his voice unwavering. "We're here to offer a chance for something greater than war, a chance for both our peoples to survive and thrive. This isn't about mercy. It's about unity." Volgar scoffed, clearly unconvinced. "Unity?" He sneered. "Your human race is a plague, spreading weakness. And you, Princess Kyra, are nothing more than a ruler who cannot protect her own kingdom." The words cut through Kyra like a blade, but she kept her composure. She knew this was part of the game. The Ankra didn't trust words. They trusted actions. If she showed weakness now, everything would collapse. But if she was to make any progress here, she had to prove to Volgar that there was something worth more than war, something he might not have considered. "You are wrong," she said, her voice steady despite the tension. "My kingdom may have its flaws, but we have one thing the Ankra do not: the ability to adapt. We understand the value of cooperation, something you've never been willing to accept." Volgar's eyes flashed with anger, and for a moment, Kyra thought he might attack. But then he chuckled darkly, his gaze flicking toward Michael. "The human diplomat speaks boldly, but words are like the wind here," he said. "If you want an alliance, Princess, you will have to prove it. I will not take the risk of joining forces with those who cannot demonstrate strength." Zyra's mind raced. She could feel the weight of the challenge now. Volgar wasn't looking for diplomacy. He wanted a show of power. And in that moment, she realized that the fate of her kingdom and the human race was hanging by a thread. "You want strength?" Kyra asked, her voice low but filled with resolve. "I will show you strength, but not through bloodshed. If I must fight to prove my kingdom's resolve, I will. But know this: if you choose to make us enemies, you will have to face the consequences of a war you cannot win." The silence stretched between them, heavy with the gravity of her words. Volgar's eyes studied her for a long moment, as if weighing her very soul. He had always crushed his enemies without mercy, but something about the princess's courage, her defiance in the face of certain death, made him pause. "You will fight?" Volgar asked, his tone almost amused. "You, who speak of diplomacy and unity, would now choose to engage me in combat?" Zara met his gaze, unflinching. "If that is what it takes to prove that my people are worth your respect, then yes, I will." Volgar's smile was cold and dangerous. "Very well, Princess, you will fight. And if you win, perhaps I will consider your offer. But be warned, no one has ever defeated me in combat." Zyra's heart raced. She knew this was a test, perhaps even a trap, but she couldn't back down now. Not after everything she had risked. "Let's see if that remains true," she said, her voice steady and filled with determination. Michael's hand gently touched her arm. "Princess, you don't have to." Zara shook her head, silencing him with a glance. "This is the only way. The Ankra respect strength above all. And if I cannot show them my strength, this alliance will never happen." The challenge had been set, and with that, Kyra stepped forward, preparing herself for the fight of her life. Volgar grinned, his warriors circling, ready to witness the clash of wills. There would be no turning back now. The tension in the air was palpable as Kyra stepped forward, her heart pounding with anticipation. The Ankra warriors, towering and battle-hardened, stood in a loose circle around her and Commander Volgar. The cold, barren landscape of the Ankra homeworld stretched out behind them, a reminder of the constant war that had ravaged this world for centuries. Today, that same war would be fought in a different way. not with fleets of ships or legions of soldiers, but with the will of one princess against the greatest warrior of the galaxy. Zyra's breathing was steady as she glanced at Michael, who stood by, his face a mask of concern and hope. He knew she didn't want to fight. She wasn't a warrior, not like Volgar, but she had no choice. This was her kingdom's last chance. If she failed, the Ankara would never take her seriously, and her people would be doomed. "I do not need weapons," she said, her voice low. Volgar gritted his teeth, not expecting this level of defiance from a princess who had never once lifted a weapon. His pride was wounded, and for the first time in this brutal encounter, he hesitated. Seeing this crack in his armor, Zyra pressed on. She had to force him to acknowledge her strength. She wasn't here just to fight for survival. She was here to prove that a different kind of power existed beyond the sword and the battlefield. It was the power of will, the power of unity, and the power of hope. With a final, desperate move, Zyra leaped onto Volgar's back, using every ounce of her strength to hold on as he flailed and tried to shake her off. For a moment, it seemed like she might fail. Volgar was far stronger, far more experienced. But Zyra refused to let go. She tightened her grip, using every bit of determination she had to stay on. She spoke into his ear, her voice steady. "You may be strong, Volgar, but I am stronger because I fight not for myself, but for those who cannot." Volgar froze, a moment of realization striking him. The challenge was never about raw power, it was about the heart. And in that moment, Volgar understood that Princess Zyra had what no one else had, the courage to stand up for the future, even when the odds were against her. Volgar finally slumped, his energy drained from the fight. He was the strongest of the Ankara, but he had underestimated the true power of the princess before him. With one final push, Zyra managed to push him to the ground, pinning him with all her might. Volgar's eyes locked with hers, respect now gleaming in them. "You have won," Volgar said quietly, his pride forced to bend. "You have the strength to lead your people." Zyra, breathing heavily but victorious, stood up, extending her hand. She had won not by brute strength, but by the willpower and resilience that the Ankara had never understood. As she turned to Michael, she saw the relief in his eyes. This battle was only the beginning, but it was a sign that there was hope after all. "Now," Zyra said, her voice filled with certainty, "let's change the future." The fight for survival wasn't over, but they had taken the first step toward a new dawn.